Yuki Tsukumo is completely absent from the Culling games, instead being relegated to protecting a sentient thumb. But what if she wasn't? What if she took the place of one of the students? How would she fare in each of the colonies and against each competitor? Well, that's what we're exploring today. We'll be going through each colony, looking at the strongest players and seeing how she does against them. Starting with Tokyo Colony number 1. There are only 3 people in this colony that could even conceivably give Yuki a challenge. The first of those is Higuruma. Higuruma has a technique that would be good against literally 99% of the population, since it can remove the curse technique of anyone who has committed a crime. Now, we don't know if Yuki has committed a crime or not, but I think it's safe to assume that she has at least some minor infractions, since she isn't exactly the most morally upstanding person. She is a bit neglectful, so maybe there's a crime committed there. I think Higuruma getting a confiscation on Yuki is pretty likely, but I don't think getting the executioner's sword is, since I doubt she has committed any crimes worthy of getting the death penalty. The question is, does the confiscation go after Star Rage or Garuda? If the answer is Star Rage, then these two can actually go head to head and have a close to fair fight. Both have a way to extend their range with Garuda and Higuruma's gavel. Both are also pretty competent at hand-to-hand combat, but I think even in this more Higuruma favored scenario, Yuki still wins. She just has more cursed energy, more experience, and can use reverse cursed energy if needed, which Higuruma doesn't develop until later. She's also likely better at hand-to-hand combat, since she could at least keep up with Kenjaku, who is tied for the best hand-to-hand combat user in the series. If Judgment takes the second option and Garuda is confiscated instead of Star Rage, then there isn't much to say here. Yuki turns Higuruma into a donut, and that's the end of that. The next person in Tokyo 1 that could potentially give Yuki a smidge of trouble is Reggie Star. Reggie is an ancient sorcerer from the Heian era, meaning he has combat experience against some of the strongest sorcerers to ever live. He also has a super versatile curse technique that allows for flexible offense and mobility options. We don't know every receipt Reggie has, but we do know that he considered his ace to be a house, which means he probably doesn't have access to anything truly broken like ICBM missiles or other military technology. To be honest, the only way Reggie gets a good matchup on Yuki is if he sits back while she deals with his underlings and figures out her technique at the same time. If he knows what she can do, he can at least fight back without the showdown being a complete and utter wash. Even with this advantage though, I don't think Reggie would pose much of a challenge. His versatility would help keep him alive for a little bit, but the power offered by Star Rage is just too much for Reggie to win against. Even if he drops a house on her, Yuki just needs to make Garuda more massive than the house and it won't crush her. She can probably tank a truck without too much issue either, but even if she does get hit, she can just heal after the contract ends. She also definitely outspeeds him by a considerable amount, considering he seemed about equal to Megumi in speed, and Yuki is definitely faster than Megumi. And that really matters when Yuki can hit him with the force of a truck that's on top of an airplane that's on top of a rocket ship. The last person in Tokyo 1 worth talking about is Takeba. If we're following the story beats of the Culling games exactly, it's likely that these two would never actually fight, since they would be aligned instead. But if Takeba misinterprets the situation on his arrival and does not align with Yuki, things get interesting. These two have 2 of those curse techniques that are just not supposed to meet. Comedian alters reality at its base and can easily overcome opposing curse techniques, but Star Rage hits so hard that it ignores concepts created by the opposing user's curse technique, so it might bypass Comedian. It's basically an immovable object meeting an unstoppable force. We really have no idea how these 2 curse techniques might interact, but if Yuki can figure out that Comedian is powered by confidence, she might be able to disable it and beat Takeba that way. If she can't destroy Takeba's ego, then it kind of depends on who would run out of cursed energy first, and also if Takeba can even run out of cursed energy in the first place. The other thing to consider is that Takeba would never kill Yuki. No matter how long the battle goes, she can never outright be killed because Takeba does not find death funny. This means she should win eventually, since she is much more willing to kill than he is. And with that, we move into the Sendai colony, where things get a lot more interesting. This is the colony that gave even Yuta some trouble, so how does Yuki compare? Well, it's kind of hard to say. We know she can one-shot Kuroushi because she had no issue one-shotting Kenjaku's special grade, but Uro and Ryu are harder. Uro's technique can act as a pretty decent counter to Star Rage, since it can bend the sky to avoid Yuki's hits, and likely also bend the sky to get out of any restraints caused by Garuda. This means Yuki would have to get creative with how and when she uses Star Rage, which would obviously slow her down, and she might end up taking a few thin ice breakers along the way. But is this enough for Uro to win? No. I still think Yuki takes it, especially since her ability is better when opponents lack information about it. She also has a sizable range advantage with Garuda, so overall she should dominate Uro. But Sendai isn't a 1v1, it's a 4-way free-for-all. I have no doubt that Yuki could beat Uro, Ryu, and Kurushi in 1v1s, but in the same situation as Yuta, it's gonna be way closer. This free-for-all pushed even Yuta to the edge of his cursed energy pool, which is considerably bigger than Yuki's. So does she stand a chance? Well, yeah. At the absolute worst, she could force a draw by becoming a black hole, in which case all of the players in the colony will lose. But doing so doesn't contribute to the goals of the students. I think Yuki's key to winning here lies in her usage of Garuda and her ability to avoid taking damage, especially from Ryu. Taking too many hits from Granite Blast would definitely weaken Star Rage, so taking him out first should be a priority for her. If she loads Garuda up with enough mass, she should be able to destroy any building that Ryu is standing on top of. This would temporarily take him out of the battle, as he would either have to jump off the building before it collapses, putting him in the air and therefore somewhat immobile, or if he doesn't get off the building in time, he gets trapped in the rubble, which would also take him a bit of time to get out of. Now when I say a bit of time, I am talking seconds. But in a battle of Jujutsu, that's all that matters. A few seconds of Ryu being incapacitated is all Yuki needs to take out Uro and bring the battle to a 1v1, which, as I stated earlier, should be an easy win for her. Another option is using Garuda to tank a Granite Blast and then using that opportunity to get in on Ryu and end him quickly. Yet another option is using Garuda as a whip to extend Yuki's range and take Uro by surprise, or potentially even throwing the Shikigami like a spear. My point is, Yuki has a lot of options if she wants to use her full kit. She can also use Binding Vows to preserve her life if she really needs to, like Hikari did against Kashimo, sacrificing a limb to preserve her life since she can just heal herself later with Reverse Curse technique. The other aspect to consider is whether or not she keeps her opponents alive. Obviously, the students do need the points that Ryu and Uro have, but I don't know if Yuki wins if she leaves the other people alive like Yuta did. I think that's the main difference between the two of them. Yuta can beat the opponents and leave them alive to take their points, but I think for Yuki to come out of the Sendai colony alive, she would have to kill her opponents. This is thanks to Yuta's wider kit of abilities that can be catered more towards subduing opponents rather than outright strength. Regardless, I think Yuki can survive and win the Sendai colony, so let's move on to Tokyo 2. In Tokyo 2, we have two more sorcerers to talk about. The first is Charles. Charles, if I'm being honest, has zero chance. His ability isn't that good, he has almost no experience, he's overly emotional, and he's a weeb. These are all the hallmarks of the kind of person Yuki would absolutely stomp. She would wring him out like a sweaty cloth. Like he literally gets one shot. I think even if he landed 4 or 5 hits with his G-War staff, he would still get dog-walked. He is just so out of his league against Yuki, which means it's time to talk about Yuki versus Kashimo. This matchup can get insane. Here's the issue. It is impossible for 99% of sorcerers to defend against Kashimo's cursed energy due to its electrical properties. It was compared to Nue, which has the ability to stun weaker sorcerers, and in the case of Panda, it looks like that happened against Kashimo, but it's kind of hard to tell because it was just one panel showing the effect. But this kind of stunning does not work on stronger sorcerers since Sukuna was completely unfazed by Nue with only 2 fingers. This means that Yuki shouldn't get stunned by Kashimo's electrical current, but she will still be taking pretty hefty damage from it, as it is impossible to defend against. This would essentially be giving Yuki a taste of her own medicine since her curse technique is also impossible to defend against. Assuming Kashimo doesn't get crushed like a bottle in a hydraulic press, this battle will go in one of 2 directions. The first is a slugfest. This will happen if both sorcerers realize they're on equal footing with being able to hit the other one hard, and they both think they can beat the other in hand-to-hand combat. The win condition for Yuki is the same as always, ending the showdown quickly, as the more damage she sustains, the less damage she will do. This will compound, making her weaker as she gets weaker. Is that redundant? I guess it is kind of self-explanatory. Kashimo, on the other hand, has 2 win conditions. The first is realizing that the more he hits Yuki, the weaker her hits get, and then trying to lay into her as much as possible as fast as possible. This will likely lead to a win for Kashimo, but it's not the most optimal path. The other win condition for Kashimo is to lay in for a while and then back off and activate his electrical discharge onto Yuki, as she probably won't realize this is an option he has. This electrical discharge is such a powerful ability because it seems to just tear through anything. I mean, even with Hikari, it almost killed him when he had better reverse curse technique than even Gojo and Sukuna, so I doubt that Yuki would be able to survive this attack despite her being able to heal herself. Plus, Kashimo can just lay into her while she's trying to heal her major wounds since she can't activate her technique while using reverse curse technique. There is also the possibility that that maybe Garuda could distract Kashimo long enough for Yuki to get back into fighting shape, but that seems really unlikely. The other direction this fight could go is a slower, more cautious approach from both parties. This doesn't seem likely considering both of their mentalities, but if they're both shocked by their opponent's power, they might back off and reformulate a plan. In this case, I think Yuki gets a bit of an advantage. One exchange wouldn't be enough to give Kashimo his electrical discharge, but if they back off, Yuki can still fight at a range using Garuda. Kashimo also wouldn't know that Yuki can apply her technique to Garuda, so he might end up taking additional damage from her if he gets caught off guard. Backing off could also give them more time to think about how their opponent's technique might work. I think this would help more for Yuki than for Kashimo. For Yuki, understanding that electricity is at least part of Kashimo's technique could help alert her to the potential power that he holds. This could make her more aware of things like electrical discharge, or at least help her understand to be more careful when fighting. Kashimo, on the other hand, doesn't gain too much from thinking about Star Rage. Even if he realizes Yuki is adding mass to herself to hit harder, that's not going to help him figure out a way around her technique. I think this fight could go either way, but it's definitely Kashimo's sided. Discharge is just too good on its own, and Yuki really has no good counter for it. It really is just a bad matchup for her, and it's one that she wouldn't realize is bad until it's too late. But if Kashimo doesn't get the chance to use discharge for whatever reason, Yuki wins pretty much 100% of the time. That is of course assuming that Kashimo wouldn't use his curse technique on Yuki, which is definitely the case. I mean, he was more willing to die to Hikari than he was to use his curse technique on the gambler, so I think it would be the same case for Yuki. When he said he was saving his technique for Sukuna, he meant it. If he did use his ability on Yuki for whatever reason, it's definitely just over. Like, everything that functions well against Yuki is amplified, and everything that could be considered a weakness against her is mitigated. He has a wider array of ranged attacks and the ability to see how his opponent's muscles function via X-ray, allowing him to predict moves via muscle contractions. His physical abilities are also amplified, allowing him to hit more, hit harder, and do so more safely. There's really nothing Yuki can do against this ability besides turn into a black hole or hope for some sort of Garuda cheese. Maybe she could use him like an anaconda and pop Kashimo like a grape or something. Anyway, we still have one final colony to talk about, and that's Sakurajima. This one should be simple. If Yuki hits Curse Noya, he dies. But can Yuki hit Curse Noya? I mean, he's just so fast, moving at Mach 3 at his top speed. That's over 3,000 miles an hour. I don't know if even a special grade can truly keep up with that, but she might not need to. See, here's the thing about moving fast. If you want to turn or change directions, it is a time-consuming task. This means that Yuki could potentially predict his trajectory when he's coming in for a hit and use that opportunity to crumple him like a car. She could also possibly use Garuda to catch Noya like how Camo used Blood to do the same thing. But if she does get hit by Noya, things become a lot harder for her. With how hard Noya hits, just one collision could turn her punches from a normal car's crumple to the Cybertrucks. Taking too much damage might actually put Yuki in a position where she could lose, especially if Noya doesn't let up his onslaught to taunt Yuki for being a woman, which is unlikely for him, let's be real. I don't think it's likely that Yuki loses. If anything, I'd say it's highly unlikely. It's just not a guaranteed win for her. The only other people she might fight in Sakurajima are Sumo and Katana Man, but it's kind of hard to figure out just how strong these two are. We know they're stronger than Awakened Maki, but weaker than Second Awakening Maki, if that makes sense. This gives us a vague gauge for their strength, but if we're being honest, that's all we need to know. Even after her Second Awakening, Maki is not stronger than Yuki, which means it's pretty much impossible for these two to be stronger than her as well. Maybe if they make it a 2v1, they might have a semblance of a chance, but even then I don't think they would win. Overall, there are very few people in the colonies that can even hope to oppose Yuki. I think besides Tokyo 2, Yuki can come out alive no matter what. Having Yuki go to the Culling Games might also be better for Tengen, since Yuta would be the one to stay behind in her place, and he would likely also be more suited to fight Kenjaku than Yuki was. But that's a discussion for another day. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you again next week for another video.